Hello, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. My name is Mark Roden, and in today's video, we are going over the top 25 best supercars of the 1990s. Why the 90s in particular? Because I love the 90s. I was born in the year 2000. 1 year too late. 1 year too late, but might as well be the 90s. And so I love the 90s and love early 2000s cars. Are my favorite generation of cars. I know nowadays kids these days are saying that the 2010s and late 2000s are their favorites. You know, my father and the generation before me likes the 60s and 70s. It's just kind of how it works, but 90s is my favorite. And so I was like, I'm gonna make a top 25 list because we're doing top 25 lists now. The last one was the top 25 best, most beautiful JDM cars of all time, and this one is the top 25 best supercars of the 90s, obviously. And I was like, I want to make a 25 list. And then I got to like 15 and was like, oh no, I'm going to have to look up the rest. So some of these cars are pretty much like new cars that I just heard of today, like right when making this list. Some of them, the other 10 were like, I would say there's probably like 4 cars here, maybe 5 that I never even really knew of beforehand. But also, since this is a new like little series where we're just going to be doing top 25 lists, let me know in the comments below what 25 list you want to see. I think the next one, and I know this is going to be a hot take, but it's going to be the top 25 best SUVs of all time. Why? Because I don't talk about SUVs enough, and there are some cool SUVs nowadays. So I want to do that next, but let me know what other ideas that you guys have. Song of the day as well, ladies and gentlemen, is called Need It by Migos and Youngboy, Never Broke Again. It's a rap song. If you don't like rap music, don't listen to it. If you don't like mumble rap, especially don't listen to it, because it's kind of like a mumble rap kind of. It's the Migos. You guys know the Migos. They're like, so if you don't like that kind of stuff, don't listen to it. I think it goes absolutely hobgoblin hard. Okay, like this song is stupid hard. It's harder than Minecraft survival. Like, it's harder than playing against somebody with an X in his name in Rainbow Six Siege. It's the hardest thing in the world. It's so good. But without further ado, let's go right into it with number 25. Alright, number 25. Two things. First of all, sorry for wasting 2 minutes of your time. I've gotten a couple comments recently of people being like, dude, you talk for way too long in your intros. And so to those people, I apologize. I try to keep them low, but I always just start rambling, man. It's like I'm rambling right now. And then the other thing is, if you notice I had like bright blue girly curtains in the back and you're new to this channel and you're like, wait, what is this guy, like secretly a woman? No, I'm in my sister's room. Anyways, 25 is the Callaway C12. I have known this car. This is a car I didn't know of, but it is one of the ones I had to look up because I was, you know, strapped for choices. This is a beast. It's pretty much just a heavily modified C5, I want to say, right? C5, maybe even C4, actually. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it is a C5 Corvette with a ton of power. It's like, you know, Hennessy? It's like, Callaway is like Hennessy. They build just like rambunctious versions of cars that are already pretty rambunctious, and this is one of them. All right, 24th place is one of the cars that I looked up and is pretty much new to me. I've heard of this car before, but I never knew how cool it actually was. The Lisst Storm. The Lisst Storm sounds like a car that would be like a Hot Wheel. Like you would buy a Hot Wheels and it'd be called the Lisst Storm. Like, it's kind of goofy. It would be like the main antagonist in like a Need for Speed game. But it's actually a pretty cool car, especially after watching videos of it. Slightly modified with the spoiler on the back. This thing looks pretty freaking sick. Now, in terms of like its impact, it didn't have that much. That's why it's here at the 24th spot, but it's a unique car. 23rd, and hear me out, some people might think this isn't a supercar. I do think it's a supercar. It's a Chevy Corvette ZR1 C4. The C4 Vettes, even though people think they're like the worst Corvettes of all time, honestly speaking, the C4 Corvettes probably are the worst Corvettes of all time. Realistically, maybe the C3s. It was just a gas crisis. These cars were pumping out low horsepower numbers. But then they made the ZR1. And the ZR1 was just like an absolute tank. And I know that, again, I know there are people out there that are going to say Corvettes aren't supercars. I don't really understand where that idea comes from. Most of the time, when they come out, they have around the same horsepower as the supercars of the time. They are racing against the supercars of the time. The only difference is that they're cheaper. Like, do you qualify a supercar off its price? Personally, I don't do that. 22nd is a car I never got behind, but I know the rest of the community likes it, so that's why I put it on the list, but I'm not putting it any higher than 22nd. You guys can eat my dookie. It's the Vector M12. This whole Vector company, they made a couple of them. They made like the Vector M12, the Vector W8, I want to say is the one. And I never liked these. I think they're modified Lamborghinis, if I'm not mistaken. I think Lamborghini looks 7 million times better than these. They could be super fast. They probably are super fast. But the looks is what draws me away from them. I just cannot stand the looks of this car. Again, I know the community likes them, and that's why I put it on the list. But me personally, I don't. Barely missing out on the top 20 is another car that I actually didn't know about until making this list. The Cazetta V16T. It's a pretty cool car. I personally, looks-wise, I'm not the biggest fan of it, and unfortunately, I can't really speak on its like performance or anything because, again, this is a car that I pretty much just learned about today, so I don't know. Excuse me, Jesus, I just burped. I don't know too much about them, unfortunately. It kind of also does look like a Lamborghini. It looks like a Lamborghini, like, Diablo thing. And I think it looks significantly worse than the Lamborghini Diablo, personally. And on top of that, when I was looking it up, it seemed like this car was extremely rare. Like, there's not a lot of them out there. And if that's the case, I don't necessarily think this is a car I'd be spending the amount of money that it probably is running for on. 20th place is a car I had heard of before, but didn't really like know too much about. And when looking, I did have to look this one up, but I like I said, I have heard of it before. It's the Isdera Commendator 112i. I heard of it. It was in like the really old Need for Speed games. It used to be in like Need for Speed 1, 2, and 3, like the very first Need for Speed games. This car was in them, and it was back then. I didn't really like it because those graphics were awful. But now that I've like looked it up and seen it with like how it actually looks, it's actually a pretty cool looking car, especially the rear end. It reminds me a lot of like a old version of the McLaren Speedtail. Tell me I'm wrong, but this car is like a classic McLaren Speedtail. 19th place, buddy old pal, I don't give a tiny rat's butt cheeks if you don't think this is a supercar, because it is. The Lotus Esprit V8. Lotus in general is awesome. I've said this multiple times on my channel. I love Lotus. They're such an underrated brand. The Esprits in particular are really cool. And then they were like, hey man, let's make it even cooler. I want to put a V8 in it. And that's just awesome. In terms of performance, it was, again, competing with supercars of the time. Was the price the same as supercars? No. But why do people think that the price is what makes a supercar a supercar? I love the Esprit. Unfortunately, it didn't do as great as like a lot of the other supercars on this list, which is why I'm only going to put it here at the number 19 spot. And again, it is kind of controversial whether or not it's a supercar, but I love this thing. Pop-up headlights, nice little spoiler on the back. Buy it in yellow. 18th is another controversial car, and whether or not it's technically a supercar. It's the Acura / Honda NSX NA1, the first generation of the NSX. I think the NA2 was also born during the 90s, but I'm gonna go with the first gen because the first gen is more cool looking anyways. That's a pop-up headlights. Yeah, the NSX is iconic. I mean, everybody knows the NSX. It literally stands for National Sports Car Experimental or something like that. So it literally, from Honda, they're saying it's not a supercar, they're calling it a sports car, but I don't care. I'm still counting it as a supercar. I mean, dude, again, I've said it before with the Esprit, I said it with the Corvette. It's a car that raced against the supercars of the time. It is incredibly super when you compare it to the rest of Honda's lineup. And then the NSX like GT cars, the race cars, were insane. I think it's a supercar. Again, I'm putting it at 18th because I know the rest of the community might get mad at that, but I think it is. 17th, however, is just 100% no ifs, ands, or butt cheeks about it, a supercar. The Nissan R390, another Japanese supercar, actually. Not a lot of them in the 90s. A lot of the Japanese companies were just making relatively affordable sports cars, like the RX-7, Silvias, Supras, etc., etc. But the R390 was one of a kind. This thing was a road legal GT1 car. And most times that we hear like about a road legal race car, it's like a GT3 road legal race car, like the Porsche GT3 RS or the Mustang GTD. And like those are super cool cars. Well, the R390 was that, but GT1. GT1, for those who don't know, is pretty much LMP1. Those are pretty much like the top of the line race cars, okay? And this was a road legal version of it. Unfortunately, they're so freaking rare, and the R390 actually performed pretty badly in its class, so that's why I'm putting it at the 17th spot, but it's still a really unbelievably cool car. 16th place, I thought for the longest time was built in the 80s. I always would have considered this an 80s car, and technically it was built at first in the 80s, but it trickled over into the 90s. It's the Ferrari 512 Testarossa. Every time you think of a Testarossa, you think of the 80s, obviously, because of all the movies and video games where the Testarossa is in the 80s. And again, it makes sense. Again, the car was built during the 80s. It was launched in the 80s, but it trickled over into the 90s, and I love the 512. This thing is one of my favorite classic Ferraris, hands down. 15th place, and by the way, even though I said it's one of my favorite Ferraris, there are two more Ferraris on this list. So you may be like, well, why is it at 16th then? Performance-wise, it wasn't the best of the classic Ferraris. But either way, 15th place, the Jaguar XJ15. I just realized it's the 15th place, and it's the XJ15. Look at that coinkydink. What a weird coinkydink. Either way, yeah, the XJ15 is kind of slept on. Not a lot of people even know this car exists, and the looks are really dragging it down for me. I've never really cared for the XJ15's looks. It looks like a catfish, and like not a cool catfish. Like this is like a catfish that you would be like, it might have some sort of brain aneurysm or something. 14th place is a very divisive car on looks. I've seen a lot of people say that it looks good, but I've seen a lot of people say that it looks bad. It's the Aston Martin Vantage V600. To the people that say it looks bad, I think you care too much about like crazy vents and stuff, because this car is much more tame than a lot of the other cars on this list. It's like, It looks like it could relatively be just a kind of a regular car, but then again, you're not going to look at it and think it's a regular car. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's one of those kinds of cars, like a GTR or something, where it's like, yeah, on paper it kind of looks like not that crazy, but then you see it in person and you're like, wow, that's sexy. And that's what this car was. Aston Martin wasn't really like a powerhouse in the 90s like they are nowadays, and this is like their first attempt at making something insane, and I think they succeeded. You know who was a powerhouse in the 90s though? Porsche. And Porsche made the 911 993. Spoiler alert, it's one of my favorite Porsches of all time. I don't like 911s that much. I'll be the first to admit it. I'm not like a big crazy 911 enthusiast. I feel like you either like love 911s so much to the point where it's like a cult, or you just don't really care about them. And I'm one of the people that don't really care about them. But the 993 is absolutely insane, especially the GT2 993. And then on top of that, I didn't include it on this list, but a lot of lists online were saying I should. The rough CTR 2 or whatever it was called, the Yellowbird thing, that thing was even crazier. Like the 911 993 was just an insane platform, but bone stock, I don't think it compares to the rest of the cars. 12th place is the reason why I wanted to make this list, because I remember this car one day when I was just sitting there. I think I was watching a video or something, and it was like in the video, and I was like, oh my god, I should make a best 90s car because I love this car. The Panaz Esperante GTR1. If you don't know what this car is, you either A, never played Gran Turismo 4, or B, are just a normal human being, because like no one knows what these cars are. They are unbelievably awesome, in my opinion. The rear end looks a little bit wacky, I'll be the first to admit it, but the front, it looks like a mixture of like a Dodge Viper and like a Ferrari. It's just a perfect combination of everything. The long front end, oh my god, performance wise and like history, it didn't really do that good in its class, so that's the reason why I'm putting it at 12th, but it's an awesome car. Barely missing out on the top 10 is one of the Ferraris that I do think are better than the 512 Testarossa, the Ferrari F50. The Ferrari F50 pretty much just improved on the F40 in every single way. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like, if you argue that, you're just wrong. The F40 was a better car overall than the F50 was a better car overall than the F40, I should say. However, the reason why it's lower, because spoiler alert, the F40 is on this list, the reason why I put the F50 lower is I just don't think it had as the same of an impact as the F40 does. I mean, the F40 will go down in history as one of the most impactful cars of all time, especially for Ferrari. And then the F50, while it did, you know, improve on it, it didn't really do anything crazy compared to that car. Where it's kind of like the Integra and RSX scenario. The Integra Type R, the DC2 Integra Type R, is like hailed by all enthusiasts as like one of the best front-wheel drive cars of all time. And then the RSX, but over in Japan called the Integra Type R, DC5 came out, and it was just better than the DC2 in every single way. But nobody really cared too much because the DC2 already implanted that bug in our minds. 10th place is the only other car. So I was actually wrong. I thought there was like 4 or 5 that I hadn't known about before making this list, but it was actually only 3. The Cizeta, was it only 2? Yeah, it looks like there was only 2. No, yeah, the Cizeta, the Lisst Storm, which again I had heard of, but I didn't really know too much about it. And then this car, which is the Venturi 400 GT. Like I said, this is the first time I've ever even heard of this car, and I fell in love with it immediately. It looks so cool. I couldn't care less if this was the most unreliable, unsuccessful race car of all time. If its record was 50-0, but in getting dead last place, I don't care, because the looks carry it. This car looks unbelievably cool. I don't know what it is, but this is a sick looking car. I love this car. It's one of my new favorite cars. Not even joking. Like, I'm not even kidding. This car's gorgeous. All right, but now we're into the cars that are actually deserve the spot. The Venturi realistically might not deserve the spot. Like I said, I don't know anything about the performance of it. But 9th place is the Dodge Viper GTS, the 2nd generation, quote unquote, because it's not actually a 2nd generation. It's still technically the 1st generation, but it's a facelift. It's kind of weird. It's the SRII. You know what I'm talking about. It's on the screen. It's this one. It's my favorite Dodge Viper generation of all time. And the fact that they still can be found for like $50,000 is absolutely freaking mind-blowing to me. These cars have a V10, 400 horsepower, rear-wheel drive, insanely hard to drive, but they look incredible. They did incredible in terms of racing, especially the freaking race car versions of this. Oh, they were sexy. They were so sexy. 8th place, listen, I've mentioned multiple times on my channel, and I'm not afraid to mention it again, that I'm not a fan of Bugatti. I don't like them. I don't like the Veyron, I don't like the Chiron, I don't like the Devo, or the Diva, whatever they call that thing. I don't like the Bolide. I don't like any of them. They just look like Beetles to me. But the Bugatti EB110 is by far my favorite Bugatti. It is beautiful. It is unbelievably gorgeous. And this was like truly one of the very first quote-unquote hypercars that we could ever really think of. It was incredible. Now, in terms of performance, I don't even think it really had that many like races that it entered into. I know they had like a GT1 version of the EB110, but I don't think they raced it that often. But it didn't really need that because it cemented Bugatti as a name to be messed with, not to be messed with. What am I saying? You know what I'm trying to say. 7th place, hey buddy, I don't care. I don't care if you're Stephen Hawking. I don't care if you're Bill Nye the Science Guy and you're going to come up to me and say, no, sir, that car is not as cool as you think it is. The Jaguar XJ220 is unbelievably awesome. In terms of race history and all that stuff, again, it's another one of the cars where I don't think they actually entered it into a lot of races because it was more so like a fashion statement kind of thing. There are a lot of cars like that. It's not a surprise. But I love this thing. It's one of the only cars on this list that I've actually seen in real life, obviously, because a lot of these cars are super rare. And I remember I saw it in the weirdest spot. I was delivering parts for an auto parts store at the time, and I walked into this guy's shop, and he was working on one. And it is just as long as you would think it is. This car is like a limousine. It was built in the 90s, and like in the 90s, cars were obviously a lot smaller. And this thing was huge. Absolutely humongous. It was mind-blowing. 6th place. If you don't believe that this car deserves top 10, you just don't know 90s cars. It's the Porsche 911 GT1 Strassen version, one of the most successful GT1 race cars of the time, and people just don't even really talk about it because of things like the McLaren F1. It is mind-blowing how people just kind of like, I mean, obviously there are a lot of people that do care about the 911 GT1, don't get me wrong. There are going to be, it's an incredible car. But what I mean by that is like, if you log on TikTok, which by the way, that was the shortest ban of all time. Did you guys see that? We were banned from TikTok for 2 minutes. They put us in timeout for a second and then brought it back. That was ridiculous. But if you go on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Reels, whatever it's going to be, you'll see a bunch of people hyping up cars like the McLaren F1, F40, other cars like of that nature. But nobody ever talks about the 911 GT1, and that is, in my opinion, a crime. An absolute crime. 5th place, however, and by the way, the reason why I put that car there and not like higher is because I feel like the reason why like the other cars like the F40, McLaren F1 are talked about more often is because they're kind of what started those companies, whereas Porsche was already a relatively dominant company anyways, so it didn't really matter that much when they released a car that was that great. But either way, 5th place is the Lamborghini Diablo. Probably my second favorite ever Lamborghini besides the Murcielago. The Murcielago is just peak. If you disagree, I unsubscribe. If you disagree, I'm gonna come steal your teeth from underneath your pillow, and instead of putting $1 under there, I'm gonna put eyelashes, and you're gonna be like, what are these? Because the Murcielago is perfect, but the Diablo is a close freaking second, especially the SVs, the purple SV Diablos with the white SV logo on the side. It also had 300ZX headlights, and guess what another car that I love is? The 300ZX. Realistically, the Lamborghini Diablo probably didn't deserve 5th, but that's my guilty pleasure choice of the list because 4th place is the Ferrari F40. The Ferrari F40, like I said, it's iconic, and while I do think it's overrated, I've said that multiple times, I still think it's kind of overrated. I do understand the significance and importance that the F40 had. There are tons of car guys out there that will say the F40 is Ferrari's best ever road car. I disagree. I don't really think a car with no AC, no working windows, and no power steering or anything like that deserves to be quoted as the best road car of a brand. Like that, best track car, maybe, but road car, I don't know about that, man. It's kind of weird. Either way, the F40 is obviously incredible. This is another one of the cars on this list that I've actually seen in person. I saw it at a museum, and wow, they are unbelievably low to the ground. They are purpose-built race cars. It is incredible. 3rd place, another GT1 car that I think is so freaking slept on that it might as well be called a Tempur-Pedic. The Lotus Elise GT1. The Lotus Elise GT1, I don't know about its racing history. I don't care about its racing history because it's freaking awesome. It is so awesome. It is next level awesome. Like I've said before, I'm a big fan of Lotus. I like the Lotus Esprits, but you know what I like even more than the Lotus Esprits? The Lotus Elises. The Lotus Elises are sick cars. They're exactly the type of car that I enjoy. A lightweight car with a short wheelbase that can rip around corners like it's nothing. And then they decided, you know what, we're going to take that idea and completely get rid of it. It's going to have a very long wheelbase. It's going to be a lot heavier, but it's going to keep the same idea of being able to rip around corners at the speed of light. And then they made that and they called it the Lotus Elise GT1. The fact that this thing is even road legal to me is a safety hazard. 2nd place, unfortunately, I didn't want to put the Lotus Elise GT1 at like 1st, even though I do love it, because realistically, it didn't like impact the world that much. But 2nd place is a McLaren F1. The McLaren F1, as far as I know, is still to this day the fastest naturally aspirated car in a straight line, top speed wise. While that's not that important to me, I've said that before, I don't really care too much about top speed and stuff like that because it's like, how often are you going to actually reach a car's top speed? Very rarely. But even though it doesn't matter to me that much, obviously the significance of top speed in cars is pretty huge. People love to talk about it, and the McLaren F1 doing that was insane. In terms of its racing history, it was also pretty damn powerful. I do believe Audi's R18 TDI or whatever that thing was called was actually better than it though, but the McLaren F1 slash GTR slash LM slash GTR Longtail, whatever you want to call it, the McLaren F1 line was and always will be one of the most important motorsports legends of all time, and it's also a gorgeous looking car. Honorable mention, because I wanted to mention these cars, but I didn't want to put them in the actual list because they're not road cars. Any sort of Group C, Group B, or Group A race cars. Any one of them. Obviously, Group B is the rally group, and everybody knows about the Group B race ones. But Group C is the one that I love the most. The Group C with the Mazda 787B, the Sauber C9 Mercedes, the freaking Nissan R92 CPs, the Toyota TS020s or TS030s, I want to say it was one of those two, the Porsche 962s. Like, they had some incredible Group C cars, and that's just a very small fraction. There are so many more cars that I just can't think of right now that were incredible. And then obviously Group B's rally history with the Audi S1 Quattro, the RS200, that was incredible. And then Group A was also very slept on. Incredible group. But first place, in my opinion, the best supercar of the 1990s goes to the Mercedes CLK GTR. Why? Because it is unbelievable. Like, the fact that Mercedes ever even made a car that looks anything similar to this car is insane. And then they did it again, by the way, with the AMG 1. The AMG 1 is another car that I feel like is going to go down in history as such an important car. Like, that thing is, it's F1 car for the road. But that's pretty much what the CLK GTR was. It was pretty much just a Group C race car, LMP style race car for the road. And that's exactly, and they had a lot of those, you know, the Lotus Elise GT1, the Ferrari F40, the Porsche 911 GT1. They were relatively just all the same thing, just road-going versions of GT1 race cars. But the Mercedes CLK GTR is one that really strikes as like surprising, because it's like you kind of expect that from Porsche, you know, they're gonna make race cars, like it's kind of their whole thing. Lotus, literally Lotus's entire like history is about racing. But the Mercedes, while they have been a good competitor in racing, they kind of just like came out of nowhere. And then on top of that, its performance was incredible. The CLK LM is still one of the best race cars of all time, in my opinion. It looks incredible. It sounds incredible. The freaking valve covers are bigger than my entire engine. It's insane. It's an actual insane car. But ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of today's video of the top 25 best supercars of the 1990s. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. These are the curtains I was talking about, by the way. Those are not mine. Although they are kind of fire. I'm not gonna lie, they're kind of sick. But they're not mine. Not mine, unfortunately. So if you think I have girly curtains, take a look at your curtains, buddy. Either way, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what other videos I'd see. More importantly, let me know what other top 25 lists you'd like to see. I feel like it's a good idea to just start making some of these. I was also thinking about doing just top 25 best race cars of all time, like just straight up race cars. The BMW S, what is it called? The V12 LMR, that's what it's called. The BMW V12 LMR, that deserves to be on there. Like, there are some good race cars out there. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I do appreciate it. I'm forgetting that something that I want to tell you, but I'm not gonna let it bother me. I'm not doing it anymore. I don't know if you guys have noticed in my recent videos, but at the outro I always say how like it drives me nuts because I forget things all the time now. I'm always like forgetting. I'm like, wait, what was I just gonna say? It always happens. But you know what I'm doing from now on? Whenever I forget something and I can't remember it, I just go, I don't care. I don't care. I do care though, secretly in the back of my mind I do care, but I don't care. Either way, thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate it. Das Badania, and have a nice night.